am Kim Bresser, One Voice Evolving. I'm your podcast host, your chief visionary, and your change agent. And I am here to talk to you about some lessons from the road that I learned after I took all of the work I've done in the last year with One Voice Evolving podcast and my racial equity work into real world workplace for a span of 2 months to work with the executive team to do what I've done across multiple states and multiple kinds of companies in the last 20, 25 years. And that is culture and communication, teaching people how to talk so people will listen and listen so people will speak. And in this case, it is the first time I've done it in a particular region of the country that is known for oppression and historically has a lot of generational trauma that I knew about intellectually, but until you've lived among the people, I don't think you know a thing until you do it. So today we're going to talk about what I did, what the postmortem, what didn't work so well, what I learned from it, and how I've adjusted my sails going forward, and why it's important to know your voice, to know your story, to learn other people's stories, to understand their collective voice so that your communications don't get stalled in the middle. So the first thing is that I am from the West and then the Northwest. I did 40 years in the desert in Nevada and then moved my little family up to the Pacific Northwest, where we did another 20-something years before I ultimately moved back to the Northeast coast, New England, where I retired. This particular project was done in the Southeast. And I felt at that time like it was going to be a test for me. It was a test of, okay, you've been learning, you've been doing the book studies, you've been understanding racial equity, you've been, learning from people of color, you've gotten a little involved in politics. What happens when you are in a facility where your skin color doesn't carry as much weight, or where you're interacting with Asians and Hispanic and Black and brown people and white people without being inauthentic? How do you bring all of who you are to the table in each and every encounter? And can you do that and be worried about impression management? What are other people going to think if they see that I think this about racial equity? What's going to happen if they find out that I do a podcast that would either embolden them or frighten them to know my views on things? And so I had to let go of a whole bunch of ego and a whole bunch of preconceived ideas and a lot of fear, because the rest of that story is that I was doing this work in a place I had never been, in an age I've never been, in a body I have never been in. And I didn't know. I love to be paid well to travel and speak, but I didn't know if I was going to love to travel as much, hoisting bags like I was when I was a road warrior on airplanes. And I didn't know if I was going to feel extra vulnerable in public spaces because I'm a smaller woman now and an older woman and perceived differently. It helped that people told me that in the Southeast, generally age is respected. Oh, great. What they didn't tell me, and that I observed firsthand and didn't know what I was seeing until after it was all over, was that there is a real difference in the way different areas of not just our country, the United States, but this continent of North America communicates, receives information, and gives information out. And until you acknowledge, understand, uncover that information, you don't have all the tools in the box you thought you had. And that was what I discovered. It wasn't until the postmortem at the end that I went back to a college book called The 9 Nations of North America that explained why people are so much more independent thinkers challenge authority in the West, far more likely to be libertarian in the Northwest, and far more likely to go along to get along in the Southeast. And that go along to get along, that generations of built in, not just respect, but deference to the majority power holding voices mean that when you are in a facility that looks incredibly diverse on paper, and then you walk through that facility and you see segregated areas based on racial demographics, um, that it's not likely to be an odd occurrence. Everybody's happy in the bubbles that they surround themselves with, as happy as you can be with plantation management. And that was the hard thing to say. And apparently, it was an even harder thing to hear for some of the people who have taken that as their right and privilege for granted in those places. The first time that I was in a meeting and I spoke the thing that everybody knew and nobody was talking about, you could almost hear the air suck out of the room as 8 leaders went silent. And they weren't, I was watching body language at that point to say, well, are they looking to the CEO to see if he's going to approve or disapprove what they say? And it wasn't that. But there was a lot of side-eyeing this way without moving their head to see who was going to move first, if anybody. And in reality, almost every time, the entire time I was there, I was unable to create what I am so good, professional, and practiced at, of creating a safe space for people to feel what they feel, see what they see, know what they know, and say so. But in this environment, we could not get them past doing that in this mixed group of leaders. And I struggled. I struggled because I come with a big toolbox. I have solutions for just about everything, but I had never run into quite this. And every time that I was there for 2 weeks and I would leave for a week, then there would be some regression and we'd have some catching up to do before we could take another baby step or two forward. And the first thing that was clear was that the timeline that had worked for me everywhere else I'd been was not going to work in this particular location, because whatever that was so deeply ingrained, and it baffled me. So the first thing when I came back for my month off was I read up about all the different parts of North America, and then it began to make sense. And I used some of that data in my report out for this company. The second thing that happened is when I did a communications audit and actually got the know, like, trust factor enough to get segments of 200 employees to tell me what it was really like to work there, not what the employee manual that didn't exist said, not what they thought I wanted to hear, but what it really felt like on a Monday morning to think about having to come into work. What were they struggling with? And again, these communication audits cannot be taken as a one-off. They are part of what happens at home doesn't stay at home, and what happens at work doesn't stay at work. It follows your home and it follows your work. Now, compound that with the fact that it was after January 20th, 2025, and we had just had a change of administration in our government. And there were executive orders coming out on the daily. And oh my God, we're over 100 days in and it's still happening. But they were coming out on the daily that were putting people on edge. And what I know about shame and secrecy and healing is harm doesn't happen without complicity. And we don't heal from it all by ourselves. And yet our American culture is, Be independent, be strong, suck it up. Don't let them see you cry. Don't let them see you sweat. So all of that is a place in the workplace. And we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about good. Well, we don't talk about a lot of things. There were no secrets in that place, but there were a lot of things people didn't talk about. And what I saw that was glaringly missing from the culture was that there was no place, particularly in the administration's attack on DEI, there was no place to talk about what's happening on the outside of work and home that is affecting you at work and at home. What is happening to keep you scared and silent, even when there's no measurable, demonstrable retaliation likely to happen? Because it's buried in the DNA of the people. It's buried in the culture of the organization that's been there for 23 years. It's buried in the unwritten rules that say, don't make the white folk uncomfortable or you're going to pay a price. When I realized that the only people that felt comfortable to speak were the white folks, and particularly the white male folks. And they were also the loudest and the most pushback about any data points that made them feel uncomfortable, because this was supposed to be, in their mind, a positive team building experience. In my mind, it was a what's keeping you from being the best place to work. And it was the unfiltered comments that I took time to neutralize, to anonymize so they couldn't be identified, and put them out for the leadership team to look at and to digest. They didn't want to own the problem. They wanted to make it somebody else's problem so that they could supervise fixing the problem. They didn't want to look at themselves and their discomfort. They wanted to make other people make them more comfortable. So that, for me, triggered a lot of things. My own trauma response from years and years and years of misogyny, from years and years and years of you're overreacting, you didn't understand, you didn't do it right, you're too much, you're not enough. I wrestled with my demons that last round, as I had to find the boundaries that said, I'm responsible for what I say. I'm not responsible for what you hear. And if you get triggered by something I say, your job is to look at you and what's triggering you. Other people don't make you feel. You do that all by yourself, just like I do. So if you say something that triggers a reaction from me, my first step is to look inside and see what it was that triggered that, and then decide what I need to do about it. My leading by example is that I show you how that's done, and then I give you the tools to do it, and then I watch you do it, and then you grow and learn too. But what I realized is I can't care more about culture and communications and being a best places to work than you do. I can't care more about a marriage than my partner does, because one person can't do the work of two. Well, one person sure can't do the work of 200. So I had to begin to hold my own boundaries. I had to begin to remember who I was, what's authentic for me, what's my voice, find a way to use my voice. And I tried to translate. I tried to understand somebody who, you know, with a different worldview of corporate America than I have, how they might receive that, how it might be better for me to communicate with them. I even played with artificial intelligence to say, well, this one is a military veteran. Maybe if I put it in military terms, we'll get a spark. They can find it. And everything I attempted only created another round of pushback, another round of, I just don't think you get it, a rather round of, well, we're not really in alignment. And it was painful. It was painful to watch the people who trusted me, believed me, knew that I would communicate that to their management team for change, and who saw when I would leave for a week or 2 weeks at a time, saw the back channel that was trying to operate to get me out of there. They were afraid. They were afraid that because they had spoken up, if I left, they would be particularly unprotected. And I struggled and I fought with all the resources at my command to be able to give them a landing zone that would take them another baby step, that would validate their courage and their voice and their observations that the leaders would take. And I have no visibility into that organization anymore to know if anything happened or not. So here's what I know. I go always back to the starfish story. There's on the beach, there's a child on the beach, and there's starfish that have washed up. Thousands of starfish have washed up, and this child is taking a starfish and throwing it back into the sea, and then picking up another one and throwing it back into the sea. And an adult comes along because in our infinite wisdom, we think we can help this. And we say, there's no point. It's hopeless. You're not going to make a difference. There's thousands. You'll never get to them all. And the child, looks at the adult and picks up a starfish and throws it back into the sea and says, made a difference to that one. That has been the calling on my life, always. It has always been on me to find a way to make a safe place so that every voice matters. The older I get, the fewer F's I have to give, the more experience I have, the better I can navigate crowded in places. But in this case, all I can hope is that I dropped some seeds along the way that somebody's going to pick up when nobody's looking. That's going to make a difference for them. And for their generations. I was at the Rare Woman Collective BRIO meeting, becoming a racial equity operative. And the conversation was about mental health and disparities in medical treatment and mental health and equity in America. Never mind the financial issues. And one of the and I have been stalling. I have stalled most of the month on doing this because I don't like to cry. I don't like you to see me cry, especially, but it goes with the territory. So it was very helpful for me to take another lens onto my experience earlier this year. And that is lens of mental health, mental illness, and generational conditioning and generational trauma, the stuff we don't remember, but the body knows. The fact that in the in the South United States, the historical and contextual and economical status for centuries has very much caused a uh, don't disagree with the boss mentality. And even if you were born and raised in the last 30 years and that's not part of your generational culture, the fact is the DNA of your ancestors is still influencing how you interact in the populace, whether or not you make eye contact, whether or not you confront injustice, whether or not you speak up or stay silent. How self-protective are you? We like to call it complicit, but in reality, it is simply our survival skills to be safe. And I have been 30 days out of there and off grid and just being present in my body with my husband and our family and trying to recalibrate and understand what the lessons from the road were. So I think I can get them down to 5, maybe 6. And I was so moved by this entire experience that while I learned and remembered that corporate America is probably not the place that wants to heal and become a healthy workplace, because that's anathema to their bottom line profit margin, people as machines mentality. uh, what it did do was say, this work I do is for people who want it, not for people who need it. And for those who want it, I am creating at onevoiceevolving.com a workbook, self-study, or with me of going through the lessons to help you understand the story you tell yourself, deconstruct the things that don't work for you anymore, find your voice, find your passion, and then find ways to exercise that in ways that bring you joy, that don't take you down, that don't make you need a Xanax, but that keep you alive and vibrant. Because honestly, rest really is resistance, and joy really is anathema to the hate that is trying to take us over. My first thing that I had to remember while I was there, when I began to decide whether I was going to go along to get along for the paycheck or whether I was going to tell the inconvenient truths about what I was seeing and hearing there, that it is not, I'm not here to make you comfortable. I am here to create transformation, and transformation is uncomfortable. Change is not comfortable. It's why people resist it so much. So I had to stop filtering truth through their fears and pushback, fears they'd have to be accountable, fears it was worse than they thought, fears they would look stupid for not knowing. I had to stop filtering what I said for their convenience. And I had to remember all of those marginalized voices who trusted me with their truth so that I could communicate that effectively to the ones who did not want to hear it. Clarity protects the vision of change. When people make it cloudy, it protects the as-is condition. So we prepare for panic points. When there's change, there's this little curve of change that happens. And in the change, we think we don't know what we don't know. And then we learn what we didn't know. And then, so now we're consciously incompetent. Now we know why it's not working. People will exit at that point because they want to go back to pretending they didn't know. The problem is once you see something, you can't unsee it. Anybody in recovery knows that. So down here at the bottom of that curve is a panic point, and that's the place where you either reinvest and start to learn the skills that are going to make it better for everybody, because really all boats do rise, even if they're a yacht, even if they're a rowboat, we all rise together, it happens. Or we're going to exit, or we're going to boot somebody out. You ever work in a place where there's high turnover, especially in the leadership? That's people thinking, if we get rid of this person's the problem, we get rid of this person, that's going to solve our problem. The problem is never the people. It is always one of two things. It is either a systems issue, your systems don't work, or it's a communications issue. And those are the things I look for. Where are the systems broken? What are the communications breakdown? And what can we put in place to make sure that never happens again? It doesn't just become tolerable. It has to get weeded completely out for it to be a safe place to work. Safe, psychological safety. Overwhelming response from people who do or don't want to think about psychological safety or be responsible for it. A little shift to the left is a shift toward truth. We do change in baby steps. We don't do it in big grand gestures. We do it one person, one thought, one starfish at a time. And generally what happens, if you don't have somebody on site who is able to champion this thing day after day after day for 2 to 3 years, which is how long it takes for change to occur, then what you have to do is you have to create little pods of healing within the organization from the ground up, so that there begin to be pockets of safety where people can practice, and it'll take root that way. This particular management team wanted neither one of those. Didn't want it homegrown, didn't want it from the outside. So they went on to their, I'm sure their next consultant idea that they thought was going to solve their problem. So we clear the decks. We clear the illusions and the delusions. We clear the illusion that everything's fine here. Look, no, but nothing's wrong here. Look how good we look. Look how good our numbers are. Look what our productivity is. Look how efficient we are. Sure, we can look white picket fence perfect, but what does it feel like to be inside of there? Because I was raised in a white picket fence perfect family with the 3 operational rules of don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And that is a crappy place to live. Doesn't feel good to be there. We look good on the outside. You ever know women, particularly, because I know women who are so miserable in a marriage or are suicidal, and people say to them either A, why don't you leave? Well, that's a whole misunderstanding of what the dynamic is. Or, can you be depressed? Look how much you have. You shouldn't feel that way. So the illusion that things are getting better because you're not going to the hospital, the illusion and the deludedness, the insanity of doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results has to be cleared. Clearing the decks is not 5S'ing your workstation. It is clearing the minds and the hearts of all the clutter that stands in the way of being fully human and bringing all of who you are to the table and being able to see what you see, know what you know, feel what you feel, and say so without fear of retaliation or judgment. Why is that so hard? All the problems in the world could be solved if you talk to people instead of about them and you assume good intent. Problem is, Maya Angelou said, when people show you who they are, believe them. Just make sure that what you're seeing is who they are, not your filter about who you think people like that are. So it's not your bias that's projecting, that it is really something that they actually did. Every voice matters. The story we tell ourselves is the most important story because that is the one that will fuel our feelings and our actions and our outcomes. And so it's important when we're doing this work to clear our own decks first so that we are a clean slate to hold safe places for other people to explore their voice, their trauma, their biases. I have a little segment called The Art of Apathy. I have always said, there was a line in Codependent No More that said, I think it was, I want to say chapter 5, that said, if you could feel any way you wanted and feeling that way wouldn't make you a bad person, what would you be feeling? And I'm telling you, when I was in the throes of abusive marriage and overworked and overfunctioning and overmasking in my 30s, particularly, and 40s, more than anything, I would have said, if I could feel any way I wanted and feeling that way wouldn't make me a bad person, I would feel apathetic. I wouldn't give two shits about what happened to anything or anybody because I'm an empath and because it takes a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual load to carry without boundaries other people's trauma. Heaven to me would have been to be apathetic, to have not cared what people thought. Heaven comes to those who wait. We're a little piece of heaven here on earth. It comes post-menopause, folks. When that hormonal veil lifts and it doesn't go back down like it does every month in your cycle, it lifts. The clarity is real. The courage is real. The change is real. And for the first time, you have resources and energy and time and money to put on something besides everybody else and to decide what is the legacy you want to leave? Who do you want to be now that you're grown up? Who did you start to be before the cultural programming started narrowing you down the chute into slaughter of what a good wife, a good mother, a good daughter, a good worker, a good would be? And allow you to just be as flamboyantly frivolous as you were originally designed for. It is not the life. The unexamined life is not worth living. The life I want to examine is the one by design, not the one by directive. When change occurs, have you ever noticed? Let's talk about midlife crisis for a minute, just because we can and because our audience is women over 40. In midlife, things change, things happen, and usually you get this outward manifestation. They get divorced and they go find a much younger partner, or men will buy the new red sports car or the new whatever and think that they're 22 again. Women, typically, you're going to see it first in their hair. They're going to change their hair. They're going to cut their hair short. They're going to change the color. All of a sudden it's pink. I let mine go white. And when you see a change in a woman's hair color, you think something's changing and you want them to change back, like your red hair better. But the fact is, it's too late. By the time you see the outward manifestation, the change has already occurred. They are simply now ready to tell the world what's shifted. You can't roll back the clock on change. When the marriage splits up, it's not uncommon at all for one partner to be blindsided and the other one to say, I told them so many ways, so many times. How could they possibly not know this was coming? Because denial is strong. Because denial is how we keep our psyche safe from anything we're not ready to think about or we're not ready to make a decision about. That is not apathy. Denial is not apathy. The apathy is an art, and sometimes it's a strategy. When I was in this place, in this last organizational foray, and I knew that I couldn't care more than they did, and that clearly I did care a lot because I cared about the people. Then I had to start holding boundaries around myself so that, I understood that my burnout was not part of the package. My reason to be there was to give them the tools so that they could advance their culture and communications into a way that would turn them into a best places to work at some point in the future, and to determine whether in that construct it would be well received by the people who work there. And what I found was that what I've always known, what I've always known, the people closest to the customer, the lowest paid, have the most to say and the least ability to be heard. And the people at the top of the food chain who always think their company is the greatest company on the planet have the most voice and the most influence and the most power to protect and take the least amount of responsibility they can. They take the path of least resistance. So when people are taking the path of least resistance and I'm losing sleep on a weekend, 2,000 miles from the people I love, I had to stop and take stock of myself and remember that I don't owe anybody my burnout. Nobody gets to do that. And so that meant I was doing it to myself. And so I had to pivot. And pivot meant if I'm not the person to go forward, or if this is not a sustainable travel model, then who do I know? What can I build? What can I create? What can I do, delegate, or drop that's going to reduce stress for me and for them and give them another path forward that doesn't include me? Let's see if we can do that. So again, ego, you have to drop your ego at the door to do this work, and you have to care more about the common good than you do about your paycheck or your whatever. And there have been times in my life when I was raising children, certainly as a single mom, that paycheck meant the difference between homeless and not homeless. But there was a point in time when the sexual harassment at my job was so unyielding and progressively worse that I said to myself one day, I will live under a bridge in a box before I go back into that place one more time. Pivot. That's a pivot point. Permission to pivot is what happens when you honor your own voice, honor your own values, and create your own safety independent of what's happening with your boss or your wife or your kids or your government. Safety is an inside job. We make a safe place by being a safe person. If you don't know how to be a safe person, it's because you've never seen it modeled, and we can teach that and we can practice that, and it's not very hard. Mostly it's communications. It's a language construct that changes that for you. Some journaling, some therapy, always possible. If I waited for everybody to be ready for change, change would never occur, and I'd be stuck in the corner silent. And I simply refuse. So what I had to do was become selective about my engagement. I had to choose who I was going to give executive coaching to and who I wasn't, and who I was going to give one-on-one attention to and who I wasn't, and in what time frame I was going to work and when I wasn't, and what location. Am I going to be on the road or am I going to be remote? based on my energy, understanding that that energy changes every day. And that means that some days clearing the deck means coming in here and doing 3 podcasts in a day. And some days it means 3 days to do 1 podcast because I'm on a deadline. My energy, I have to honor that because if I try to push through that, I'm not authentic, it's not real, and it doesn't change the needle. I can AI all day long and I can give you material and articles and workbooks and all the things in all the language, whether it's Justice AI or whether it's Chat GPT or whether it's organizational or just sales, or there's a million ways to silence yourself. I strongly encourage you to hold your authentic voice, especially if you're writing or trying to reach the hearts and minds of people, because nobody likes being manipulated. And they don't know who you are until you show them, which is why I like videos so much. Hard to hide. You can only hold your breath so long. I can hide behind the written word very well. I've done it during my masking years a lot. So there's emotional sovereignty. Nobody gets unlimited access to my fire. Nobody. Because sometimes I'm an introvert at heart. People don't know that, but I am. And I can people all day long, but it takes me twice as long unpeopled to get my calm back to be able to do it again. Don't wait. Healing and justice don't wait for permission. They're a commitment. They are something that is inside of me, that comes through me so that you can take some tools and it can live inside of you and come through you. This little light of mine, right? So this little light, one person to one person, one to many, depending on where I'm speaking, but it is still only the energy moving through me to you and people out there or to whomever. And I can never tell who's going to pick it up and who isn't. And that's why I don't try to pre-qualify buyers or clients. I never know where it's going to go. And I never know that my client isn't going to get it, but they're going to say something to their parent who's paying for it. And that person is going to have an aha moment. So I'm just dropping it out here like I do. We build the space, we invite the willing, and we release the rest. My days of battling people over their denial are done. My days of wrestling you for truth are done. If you want what we have, reach out. We're happy to share. If you don't like it, keep scrolling. Just keep on moving because otherwise we block. I'm not afraid of that. So this season 3 of One Voice Evolving is resilience reimagined, not redefined, not uh, in rebellion, not as resistance. It is resilience in ways we couldn't have imagined we would ever need until we were in this place, in this body, in this moment. It is the hardest thing for people to sit with discomfort and not try to make it go away or not try to medicate it away or not try to get so impaired I don't have to think about it. And I am choosing every day to stay present to what is real. It was M. Scott Peck in The Road Less Traveled that said life is difficult. Our generations, our parents, grandparents, ancestors have certainly experienced far more death and destruction than we pampered Americans in the 20th century have. And yet, here we are. And we have fear and anxiety of what's coming, and we have levels of denial saying, oh, they can't possibly do that. We're a democracy. Oh, he couldn't possibly do that. We have courts. Oh, yeah, yeah, they freaking can, and they are. And I don't have to try to make that be any different either. I just have to say, in my life, in my body, in my integrity, with my values, what can I do today to make a difference for one person who is suffering? And these podcasts, I have grown and changed so much this year. And the people who were guests of mine have grown and changed so much this year that we're going to be doing a little highlight reel of them as we lead up to season 3, Resilience Reimagined. Season 3 is going to start May 23rd. And again, we'll do 20 to 25 episodes in a season. And we hope you'll join us. We hope you will share. We hope you will engage. I have a Substack that I've started and that is I now have a team, a support team around me who can handle my virtual assistant, my legal issues, my accounting, yes, please, um, and, uh, and my marketing. So we're going to do that for a while. And we welcome you to join us for season 3 and to join us over at onevoiceevolving.com. We've got some free resources, we've got some podcasts, and we've got some deeper learning. Any of those places are a place to start, and I'll see you on the other side.